You're listening to the Journey Podcast. Curious about how the subconscious agreements you've made influence your life choices? Find out more in today's episode. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Journey Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. In this episode, we embark on a journey of self-discovery and personal transformation as we explore the profound concept of unconscious contracts. We delve into the hidden agreements and patterns that often shape our lives beneath our conscious awareness. Our guest shares valuable insights on how these contracts can influence our choices, relationships, and overall well-being. Through thought-provoking discussions and practical guidance, we uncover the tools and strategies to identify and release these hidden contracts, paving the way for greater personal freedom and fulfillment. Our engaging conversation provides a deep dive into the inner workings of the mind and the ways in which unconscious contracts can hold us back from realizing our true potential. With a compassionate and empowering approach, we invite listeners to embark on their own journey of self-exploration and contract liberation, unlocking a path to greater self-awareness, authenticity, and personal growth. Sarah Peyton, author, constellations facilitator, certified nonviolent communication trainer, and neuroscience educator, integrates constellations, brain science, and the use of resonant language to heal trauma with exquisite and warm gentleness. Sarah teaches and lectures internationally, and she's the author of 4 books on relational neuroscience and self-compassion. Your Resonant Self, guided meditations and exercises to engage your brain's capacity for healing. The Companion, your Resonant Self workbook from self-sabotage to self-care. And Affirmations for Turbulent Times, resonant words to soothe body and mind. And The Anti-Racist Heart, a self-compassion and activism handbook co-authored alongside Roxy Manning, PhD. Here is my interview with Sarah Peyton. Hi, Sarah. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because finding and releasing your unconscious contracts is such an amazing topic for holistic healing. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Petra. I'm delighted to be here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And would you like to share a little bit about yourself and your story and how you came to do what you do today?
Well, overall, I came to this work because I had such a toxic inner voice. It was just not a warm accompaniment inside of my own brain. And when I was young, I'm 60 now, when I was young, the word was that whatever happened to you by the time you were 3, it was just set in stone. So I was like trying to figure out how to live with a toxic inner voice, which includes substance abuse and just self-distraction and all kinds of compulsive behaviors. And I stumbled across a combination of nonviolent communication and then started learning about interpersonal neurobiology, about this study of the effect of brains on each other. I was like, wow, this really starts to explain my whole inner landscape. And so I began to learn it. I was doing some volunteer work in the prison, and the women were so excited about the information about trauma and how it impacted their brains. So I studied and ended up writing a book and traveling around the world and talking to people about the toxic inner landscape and how to make it a sweet place to live instead of such a hard place to be.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. And thank you for sharing that journey with us. And it sounds amazing, the services that you're providing and the things that you have learned and found out and you're sharing now with people. And how does trauma affect our brain? What have you learned on your journey there?
Well, one of the things we do, of course, is internalize the way that we're spoken to. So if our mom or our dad speaks to us with cruelty or name calling or things we don't even consider name calling. Like, I don't know, sometimes people call themselves stupid. They don't realize that it's name calling, or tell themselves they're an idiot. They don't realize it's name calling. But sometimes our parents are pretty kind to us, but they're struggling themselves. They're calling themselves names inside of their own brain. They're not forgiving themselves for things that they consider to be mistakes inside of their own brain. And we're actually downloading their scripts without them even being cruel to us. They're cruel to themselves. And so we carry that forward. A couple of different ways in which we download stuff from the parental people that are taking care of us. But we also do it if we don't have any contact with our parents at all. If we're with if we've been adopted into a whole nother family, or if we've been raised like wolves without any parents. Not that wolves don't have parents, but what we'll do when we're too alone is we'll craft within ourselves ways to explain the world that make sense to us, that don't end up being very life-serving. So this is where unconscious contracts come in, is we make agreements with ourselves to compensate for there not being people who are taking very good care of us. And we end up with I will believe that I'm ugly, or I will believe that I'm not enough, or I will believe I'm too much. And we'll just carry it as a conviction, as a truth. We're like, this is the truth. I'm just too much. People turn away from me all the time. And then we'll start to notice, oh, my mom dissociated. My mom drifted away whenever I brought any life energy into the room. Of course, I'm carrying a conviction that I'm too much, because it was every day, every minute when I was tiny. And we'll say, oh, I have an unconscious contract to believe that I'm too much in order to explain my mom's dissociation and her driftiness and how I could never capture her attention. Which now that I'm an adult, I see, oh, that's limiting. It doesn't mean that I'm too much now. Mom was really struggling. It doesn't occur to us when we're little.
Yeah, absolutely. That's wonderful insight. And I'm curious because a lot of us take those unconscious contracts as a given, as a fact, as that is really the truth. So, how do we even know we have unconscious contracts when we are taking these on at face value and believing them?
Anytime we want to use the words always or never about ourselves, or anytime that we're calling ourselves names or saying mean things to ourselves, we need to know that it's not true, that those things come from trauma. We are extraordinarily expansive beings. We have tendencies, sure. I often do something, or I rarely do something, but those always and never ideas, I could never do public speaking. That's an unconscious contract. That's an unconscious contract, probably based on very good historical experience of being humiliated or shamed by a teacher or by a coach or by a parent or by other kids. And it means we had a traumatic experience. It doesn't mean we can never do the thing. If we want to go in that direction, we can say, oh, what is my unconscious contract? I will never allow my voice to be heard in public in order to save myself from shame and humiliation, no matter the cost to myself. Is that still a good contract? Am I still saving myself from shame and humiliation? It worked when I was little and there were bullies around. Are there bullies around now? Maybe not. Maybe it's not as dangerous as it was at one time.
As you're speaking about the unconscious contract, I feel like they could place a lot of limits and cause a lot of negative things to happen in life as we grow up and we hang on to them. So, how have you experienced that with yourself or some clients that you work with? How do these contracts impact our lives?
Well, one that I was working on for a very long time for myself was the contract to work, and never stop. And I tried thinking about different in order tos, and nothing changed. I just kept working. Then one day I was sitting in my living room and I was doing bookkeeping at 10 o'clock at night. And I was like, gosh, I work so hard. I wonder why. And I used the words for the first time. It was funny. I used the words, I will be a busy bee. And for some reason, that unlocked it. I was like, oh my God, I am being a busy bee in order to be like my dad. And if I'm like my dad, I don't have to acknowledge that he died 10 years ago. I can keep him with me by just working. And I can have my father with me. When I realized that, then you can kind of feel it. It sounds simple. People are always like, this isn't going to work. This is just words. But what we're looking for when we touch into one is we're looking for an aha experience. And we're looking for a kind of a physical sense of something loosening or changing or shifting. And in that moment, it was like I could feel ties being untied and a box falling open, where there was just more choice for true rest. Because before, when I would rest, I would force myself to rest, but I would just be thinking about work.
Yeah, I can relate.
Yeah. So that just opened the door to true rest. It was very sweet. And these kinds of things happen for clients. Like they're always late. And all of a sudden they go, oh, if I'm always late, then I completely prevent I completely prevent any kind of false expectations. I completely prevent my own disappointment. If I'm always late, then I can't expect myself to be on time. If I'm always late, then I'm setting up a world where I will always fail, but it's a predictable world instead of an unpredictable world where I could be shocked or hurt. I already know that people will be mad at me. It's a given. And then people can let go of that once they realize it. They go, oh, that was very important when I was a teenager, but that is not so important now. I don't have to define myself in that narrow way. I don't have to put myself in that box.
It also sounds like these unconscious contracts can really hold us back from achieving our goals or going after things we love because we put in place these limits and these limiting beliefs and don't let ourselves love or experience or go for something that we really want. So it sounds like they can be quite limiting.
Very limiting. And it's also limiting to think of ourselves as too much or too little or not enough or bad or always responsible for the bad things that happen in the world. These are all things that people do all the time. I will believe that I must only be the only one taking care of anything, that no one else will take care of anything. That's a good self-fulfilling one. If we're expecting ourselves to always be the one taking care of everything, and we're always preemptively taking care of everything, we're not even making any room for other people to take care of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I can also imagine the stress and the pressure that comes with these beliefs that could almost cause some physical symptoms too, and headaches, backaches, or digestive upsets, and maybe even feeling really low in life or having a lot of anxiety. It sounds like these beliefs and unconscious contracts can cause a lot of problems all across the board in life.
So many problems. And as we start to let them go, our general demeanor gets lighter. Our health actually improves. When we make the space inside of our brain more comforting, then we're reducing our stress, because self-criticism creates stress. Self-criticism, that continual chronic stress creates an increase in interleukin 6. The interleukin 6 creates inflammation in the body. We have increased heart disease, increased blood pressure, increased strokes. So it's quite a lovely thing. I think everyone needs to find their own way to begin to make their brain a good place to live. But this is a lovely, effective approach to making our brain a good place to live. You just take everything that makes the brain not a good place to live, and you go, oh, those are all unconscious contracts. We can release those. I'm doing those for very good reasons from my childhood or my early experiences of intimate relationship where there's domestic violence. Will create unconscious contracts whenever there's trauma.
Yeah. I guess the really important question is, how do we release these contracts? So once we have figured out and we may have become aware that they're there, how do we go about releasing them?
As we find them, like me finding the one with my dad, it made me cry when I discovered it. And then I was like, okay, do I want to keep this? You just ask yourself, you say, hey, Sarah, you made this contract with yourself. Do you want to keep it? And Sarah often says, no, we don't need that anymore. Instead, let's do something different. And then you can think of the different thing. Like, what's the different thing? I will let myself truly rest. I will know that being a busy bee does not keep my dead father with me. He's with me just as much if I'm not being a busy bee. I get to love him, I get to hold him, I get to carry him with me as a support, as a venerable ancestor. I get to love the heck out of him, and I get to feel his love coming across the life-death barrier. We get to do this. We get to move solidly and securely into the future with the blessings that we give ourselves after we release the contract.
Yeah, you touched on a really important point there. I think very often when we try to change beliefs or habits and we let something go, we almost feel like we need to fill that space with something. And you said we can fill it with something else, another belief. So do you find that for yourself and for clients you work with, that they need to almost put something else positive in that space they've created after letting go?
Yeah, I call them blessings or invitations, because people are like, well, do I make a new contract? And I'm like, no, because contract is inherently rigid. And what we want is to move into the internal structures that we form being made out of what we love and being made out of warmth and affection, and to let ourselves be pulled by our passions instead of being driven by our obsessions. Sort of just a really different movement. And these blessings or invitations are expansive, like live well. Live well is not a contract, it's an invitation.
That sounds so freeing. And like you said, even a physical sensation come from that of finally being able to breathe or like a weight being lifted off you. So that sounds very healing when you describe that.
Mhm.
I'm wondering if some people, if they've had very traumatic childhoods or very traumatic past experiences, might have difficulty releasing these unconscious contracts. They might find it difficult to do. How do you work with your clients when they might have some troubles around releasing these contracts? And how do you help them get past these barriers of release and letting these things go?
Well, sometimes the contracts just fall like ripe plums into your hand, and they're just like, oh, it's so ripe, it's ready to go. It doesn't want to be here anymore. Sometimes it takes people a couple of years of being supported and loved and cared for and responded to with resonance to get to a point where they're like, yeah, that's not such a good contract. But oftentimes, what's happening when people don't want to release contracts is there's a kind of a knot of trauma that's tied them up. So, for example, if I say, I will not speak publicly, I will not allow my voice to be heard, I will not be seen in order to survive. And we say, do you want to release this contract? And the central part of the self that's answering the question says, no, I don't want to release this contract. This is important. This is keeping me safe. This is helping me survive. I'm going to stay with it. We go, oh, okay, this means if there's nothing really scary happening in present time, if nothing really scary is happening in present time, then what this means is that the self is stuck in the past with a traumatic event or a traumatic relationship that needs acknowledgement. Once we do the acknowledgement, once we do some time travel, once we go back to the past self that really got humiliated and we go, would you like a little acknowledgement that this was a shocking, scary, horrific experience? And of course, you would feel scared. And of course, you would never want to speak again. Do you need some acknowledgement of sorrow and of alarmed aloneness and of shame? Do you need any acknowledgement of fear? Is this really scary? Would you like some acknowledgement of anger? Are you really angry that they're receiving this response? We kind of make sure we're asking about all the emotions, and the past self begins to relax with the naming. What catches us up with trauma are things that have happened that nobody has resonated with and that no one has named.
Yeah, what an interesting insight that you're offering up there. The awareness and just bringing things into the conscious and naming them, as you said. And often I found that trauma also creates a sense that you've lost your safety. And as you explained, some of these unconscious contracts might have made us feel safe or been there for survival at some point. So, do you also help your clients create or recreate a sense of safety and a place of safety so that they can let these contracts go?
Sometimes when clients feel very unsafe and had very unsafe childhoods, They create a space that, like a house, that's in a safe place that feels really, really safe to them. And they'll take their past selves to the house. But more often, people feel that their own heart space is a safe space. Most often, people will bring their past selves into their current day warm heart space. And it's like our heart becomes our home for our past selves.
That was really interesting. Actually, now that I think about that, that is the place that when something terrible happens, it's trying to recenter in yourself and finding that heart space that helps a lot often. And do you offer any techniques or any work around finding that heart space for people? Do you help with that as well?
Once we begin to open the door to the idea that our own selves make sense, then the heart space becomes very pure. So people just spontaneously find themselves with a pure and warm heart space more often than that we actually have to do a lot of work to create it. Sometimes when people don't have a sense of their heart being a pure and warm space, this is another kind of unconscious contract. I will believe that I'm cold and hard. I will believe that I should not be loved. I will believe that I do not deserve good things. And of course, we need to release these contracts in order for the heart space to become accessible, because those contracts lock the heart space away from people.
That's fascinating. And I love the work that you're doing around that. And I really hope that our listeners have enjoyed what we've spoken about and maybe had some aha moments for themselves as we were talking. And do you want to maybe explain some of the programs, services, or resources that you offer so that our listeners can get a sense of how could they work with you? How can they connect with you? And where can they find you?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, there's my website, sarahpeyton.com, and also the website for the books, yourresonantself.com. On the book website, there's a download for free guided meditations. And then it gives you a series of, you get an email every couple of days with a free meditation, and also some interesting information about relational neuroscience, about this science of the way that our brains affect each other. If people go to the website, they can sign up there. The other thing is, if you're really interested in unconscious contracts, I wrote a book that kind of serves as a fabulous handbook to unconscious contracts. It's called the Your Resonant Self Workbook. And that also is available through any bookseller or available on the website.
Amazing. And do you work with people one-on-one as well or in groups, or do people get a hold of you through the books and the workbook and that?
I teach classes, and the classes are all different subjects, like on how to time travel, or on how to heal from depression, or how to heal from traumatic relationships. It's an ongoing exploration. Whatever we can figure out to offer that lights people up and lifts them up is what we work on. And this next year, there's going to be a whole class series starting in December that goes through the whole year that follows that workbook about the contracts. And this year, our focus is going to be awe. AWE, the beautiful emotion. How do we foster a state of awe, which is so good for our health and well-being?
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And Sarah also has her own podcast called Fierce Conversations, and you can listen in from your favorite podcast provider. And we will, of course, be linking to all of Sarah's offerings in the show notes as well. We will put there how you can get a hold of her, take part in her classes, programs, find her book and workbook, and how you can find her podcast as well. Well, this has been another incredible episode, and I really hope our listeners have enjoyed our journey into finding and releasing your unconscious contracts as much as I have. I have to say that I did not know about unconscious contracts before, and this has been such an enlightening conversation. And thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom with us today, Sarah.
Petra, thank you for having your show and bringing these kinds of things to your audience. I'm so grateful to have been your guest.
It has been a privilege bringing your message to our listeners and sharing this information with them. And thank you so very much for coming on today. And take care, Sarah.
You too, Petra.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Journey podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Journey on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejourney.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.